What's up, guys? My name is Mike. Welcome back to a very special episode of Let's Play Hearts of Iron 4, our Learn About Canada edition. So we left off last time. We were talking about the lead up into Hong Kong. So to understand the sort of mentality between the defense of Hong Kong, you have to understand what the mentality of the West, and especially in this case, Canada and the UK, when it came to how they decided or how they sort of viewed the Japanese. So it's funny to us now because when people say the word Japan, you think of a couple of things. You think of, highly educated people, highly technologically advanced, super respectful, etc., like all the earmarks of a modern and, very civilized nation, among the most, technologically advanced and most advanced nations in the world. Back then, it was the exact opposite. As they called them, the little brown men of Japan were savages, they were stupid, they were cowards, even to the point where it was just like, ridiculous stereotypes like, oh, Japanese people can't see well in the dark, so we're not even in any danger of being attacked at night. That was a legitimate sort of like meme in the traditional sense that was going around at the time, where the Brits were trying to convince the Canadian High Command to go to defend Hong Kong and sort of bolster up Hong Kong. And this is the kind of like line of bullshit they were feeding them in order to make it seem more appealing. So anyway, so Canada's like, sure, you know what, no problem. We'll send our men over there. It's going to be a big, thing of prestige for us. We're going to show our true colors and start winning back that glory and really start to contribute to the war effort. All things seemed great, except a couple of things. First of all, the recruits at the time. So the Canadian Standing Army was small, very small at the start of the war. And men, for the most part, were being given a maximum of 30 days of training. You can't fucking train a soldier in 30 days. And there's accounts of this later as it came to later conflicts. I'm going to build more of these so I can trade more. I need more resources. I'm running low on this shit. Thank you, Mr. US. Much appreciated. No template for the support equipment. That's okay. We're going to build up a surplus of support equipment, and then we're going to support our boys in the field with equipment. Yes, that's what we're going to do. That's the plan. So, I mean, it was, we're losing. We lost a fuckload of men here. This is not a great battle for us, fighting through the sands and this, whatever the shit of the Middle East and of Africa, but it is what it is. We're embroiled now. So, I mean, men were being given 30 days worth of training. And when the sort of even just the planning of getting soldiers over to Hong Kong was a complete fucking mess. So the ships they were using to do it ended up being too small, but nobody really told anybody. And they weren't even able to fit on the full, like all the jeeps and trucks and stuff they would need when they landed. They weren't even able to fit those on the boat. So they ended up, like the Canadian soldiers ended up over in Hong Kong being horribly under-equipped, horribly, unmechanized, unmotorized rather. And with essentially zero training. It was so bad. The organization of sending people over was such of a fucking clusterfuck that, we'll go mechanization, that, they couldn't even keep track of who was supposed to be on the boats. There were people on the boats. Nationalist Spain joined the Axis. That's not good because this is all Nationalist Spain over here. We might have to double back and take some of that. But we will crush these guys first. We will crush you. The organization was so bad they couldn't even keep track of who the fuck was supposed to be going over there. So the boats that were heading over to Hong Kong were too small and ended up like there was people that never made the boat and they didn't even realize until they were halfway there. There were people on the boat that were supposed to have been medically discharged, but they got confused and wandered on board. Then they just ended up on the boat on Hong Kong. It's like, well, I guess you're coming along now. We're not turning the fucking boat around. And then even realized until they were out of trucks until, a good way, like when the boats were halfway past Hawaii, having left Vancouver. I guess they were swinging around to Hawaii through to Hong Kong. They didn't even realize they didn't even know how to have all the trucks they wanted. But again, the sentiment was like, don't worry about it. We'll get all that stuff over there. There's no panic. There's no worry. The Japanese aren't going to attack. And even if they do, it's no big deal. But obviously it ended up being a big deal for a number of reasons. So like I said, overall, a huge clusterfuck. Speaking of medical discharges, one of the huge issues was there was such a huge outpouring of support for the Canadian military at the time. They had huge amounts of numbers of people signing up to join up, to sign up, like just an incredible outpouring of nationalism to sign up for the military, to the point where the recruiters were actually able to be really picky. And of course, coming out of the Great Depression, one of the big issues was nobody could afford things like dentistry through the Great Depression. Therefore, they were able to disqualify huge numbers of troops or huge numbers of men and women from serving because of things like, bad dental issues and things that wouldn't be good if you're in a sort of like a battlefield situation. So a lot of people were turned away at the time. We're really taking a beating on our manpower. A lot of people were turned away at the time when it came to signing up. So that was a big issue. So I mean, the number of forces they have were, although at the time considered to be among the healthiest and strongest Canadians and some of the strongest and healthiest people truly in any military, the numbers were still quite low and with completely inadequate training. Anyway, so Canada arrives at Hong Kong, all is well for a while, but they were just so ignorant of the reality of the situation there that they didn't even see what was coming. So a couple of things. So first of all, the Emperor of Japan, what's his fucking name? I can't remember his name. Let's see if I can go see it. Hideko something or other? No, not this guy. Hirohito? Yeah, Hirohito was he basically replaced all of his, his cabinet, his political cabinet, with essentially what was considered to be a war council, which of course was frightening because it just automatically kind of let you know what was on the Japanese mind. They held this massive rally for all the troops, like 1 million plus Japanese troops, where all these troops publicly declared that they're ready and willing to die for the Japanese military and the Japanese cause. So, I mean, anybody with half a brain could see what was coming. They were gearing up for full-fledged, like, flat-out war. It was like the Americans were panicking to the point where they were sending unencrypted messages back and forth, trying to warn everybody, like, look, there's something going on with Japan, and we need to be on the boat with this one, or on the button with this one, because if we get caught with our pants down, we're going to be in real trouble. But again, okay, that's war in Southeast Asia. Good for them. Speaking of Japan, we should assign these guys to try to hem these guys in. We'll wear down their organization. They do have a port there, so that's not going to be good. They're going to be able to resupply, but at least we'll slow them down. Hopefully they're over the supply limit. Yeah, 40% attrition in here. They're way over the supply limit. So they'll either get out of there, or we'll be able to wait till their organization is nothing, and we'll be able to attack and wipe them out. And they'll lose 40 plus divisions. And that'll be good. Okay, so, I mean, they were so ignorant to the point where they just were completely blind. And the Americans were freaking out. The Brits, to some degree, were freaking out, but not as much. And the Canadian High Command was completely fucking oblivious to what was going on in reality in front of them. So you had all these troops hanging out. Oh, Leon Trotsky just got assassinated. All these troops hanging out in Hong Kong at their at the British base in Hong Kong, sitting there with their thumb up their ass. And it was... they just, like, even up to the very last second. So even up to the very last second, where we're gonna fucking wipe these guys out, where there were air raid sirens going off. The troops are just, like, the Canadian troops are just sitting around going, well, it's probably just a, it's probably just like another, oh, we overran a bunch of bitches. Yeah, fuck you guys. It's probably just like another artillery drill. You know, they're just warning us. It wasn't until, or even after, there were sights of Japanese planes dropping bombs on the base. Even then, they couldn't even believe it. There's a great account of one particular soldier at that time. We just fucking wiped out a huge amount of German troops. Fuck you, Germany! You fascist fucks. That should have broken their lines. I think we're going to be able to roll through the rest of this pretty decently. How come you guys aren't taking nationalist Spain? Anyway, so like I said, there's great accounts of the time where the Japanese planes started dropping bombs. They didn't even believe it at first. And then this one dude, I forget his name. I'll have to look him up between episodes because he's a great character of this war. And I think he later went on to author a number of World War II books about his experience. I'll look him up and if I remember, and I'll let you guys know because some of his stuff is pretty fascinating. And he was even like, well, I guess the war's on now. I guess we're being attacked, right? And that was really like the attitude of the time. Now again, consider these Canadian troops had at most maybe 30 days of training. A lot of them barely knew how to fire their rifles. There were accounts of, and the other big problem too was, of course, because the Canadian military had blown up so fast in terms of the number of troops, there were not nearly enough officers to go around. Of course, officers, you can't train an officer in 30 days. It requires a much longer investment of both time, energy, resources, and so on. So the troops are going into battle with essentially no officers as well, or just being shuffled under British officers who really had no idea just the sorry state of some of these very green recruits went. So you had two full regiments there, and between all of them, they barely even knew how to fire their gun. There's accounts of, like, for example, the British officers who had to show mid-fight how to show a Canadian troop. soldier how to fire and recharge his gun, how to reload his gun in the middle of fucking battle. And then the account goes as well is that he spent like, you know, whatever, 30 seconds a minute doing this, and the poor guy got shot before he's able to fire his weapon anyway. So you can imagine, you can see how this fucking shit is going, right? There's another account of a Canadian soldier who were throwing grenades at the Japanese, but didn't realize that you had to pull the pin out. Okay, we're extensive, we're export focus. We should go to limited exports so we can retain more of our resources. I think that's probably a smart idea. And then next we'll go to war economy. Maybe we should have done that backwards. Next 150 points, we're gonna go war economy for sure. What was I saying? Yeah, so they're throwing grenades at the Japanese troops, not realizing you had to fucking pull the pin out first. They didn't even know how a grenade worked. And of course the British officer is very dry at the time, just was yelling at them like, what the fuck are you expecting? Ooh, I've never seen this before. Wartime exception. State of war, we will be held as usual, or we can... What do we want? Do we want political power? We don't care about political power. So we'll gain the national unity. Cool, alright. So the British officer at the time, of course, is very dry and basically just commenting like, what are you planning on doing? You're gonna hit him in the head with that shit. Like, you can't knock out a soldier with a grenade, you gotta pull the fucking pin. Anyway, so complete disaster. Ironically, it was they held up for quite some time. It was like you know, almost, was it 2 weeks or 1 week? I can't remember. But despite being at such odds, and despite being outnumbered, undertrained, under-equipped, they held out through fearsome combat, far beyond what anybody would have expected of these Canadian troops with their British backup. And I mean, ironically, what really broke the back in that battle in the defense of Hong Kong was a Japanese night raid. They came up on the shores at night when nobody was expecting them, because remember, there was the assumption that for whatever reason Japanese people couldn't see well at night, and ironically it was a night raid that finally broke the British and Canadian defenses at Hong Kong and was able to get them completely surrounded. One of the last defenses was one of the few Canadian soldiers, one of the few Canadian commanders in the base, who was completely surrounded. At this point, the Japanese were basically just in point blank range. They were bayonet charging, they were firing at point blank. And he was commenting on the radio to his superiors back home that, look, I'm not going to be in here trapped like a rat. I'm going to go out there and fight by myself. No shit, he took a pistol in each hand and fucking charged at the Japanese lines with like fucking John Rambo, John Woo, Arnold Schwarzenegger style. Unfortunately, he was immediately killed before he could get to cover. I'm sure he probably took a few people down with him, and the rest of his command was completely massacred. And it was, you know, by far a lost battle. Hong Kong was lost to the Japanese, and out of the entire like Canadian forces that were there, the vast majority were killed or captured, which unfortunately was just the start of their misery being captured by the Japanese, because of course the Japanese back then were not known for their treatment of war criminals. But, or not, pardon me, not war criminals, people that were captured, prisoners of war, pardon me. Prisoners of war were not particularly known for their good treatment of prisoners of war. But we're going to talk about that in the next episode. So, thanks so much for watching, guys. Much love, big kisses. And then next episode, we're going to get into the second big disaster in Canada's history in World War II before the tides finally started turning. Thanks so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon.